Elvis Presley, Roy Orbison, B.B. King, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Johnny Cash. What do they have in common besides millions of fans and gold records? They all made their first recordings at Sun Studios in Memphis, Tennessee. Inside this simple studio sat a modest-looking instrument of musical magic, a customized, souped-up soundboard. All it had was a few simple needles, dials, and knobs. But the story of Sun Studios is the story of the birth of rock and roll music. And this soundboard was its cradle. In the early 1950s, the banks of the Mississippi resonated with the sounds of blues, gospel, and country music. These different styles collided in nearby Memphis, Tennessee, and the scene of the crash was Sun Studios. Owner Sam Phillips's motto was, "We record anything, anytime, anywhere."
Sam is one of the most unique characters in the world. There never was anybody like Sam, and there probably never will be anybody like Sam. Sam was entrepreneurial enough to believe that you could take this kind of homegrown, folksy music, especially the black music of the time, and we're talking about the late 40s and early 50s, and that somehow could be marketable.
That was a pretty, I think, bright move on this old dumb boy's part. You have to keep in mind, I was working with untried, unproven people, which was what I wanted to do. The Elvis Presleys, the Johnny Cashes, the Jerry Lee Lewises, the B.B. Kings, none of these people were really acquainted with recording.
When studio technician Sam Phillips set up Sun Records at 706 Union Street in Memphis, he knew that he wanted to create a new sound. And he did just that when he recorded R&B artist Ike Turner's Rocket 88 in 1951, widely regarded as the first official rock and roll record. The success of that record and others allowed Phillips to upgrade his studio. The most important change was to the soundboard, the main music pipeline in any studio, the device that controls the tone and volume and combination of all the instruments and voices on the recording.
I didn't have the money to buy a new board of any kind, so I thought, boy, I've got to find out where I can get me a used board and rework it. And luckily, I found one in South Carolina.
The board was an RCA Model 76D. Manufactured in the early 1930s, the board could handle sounds from 6 instruments or microphones. Today's studios can support more than 100. Phillips bought the board from a South Carolina radio station for $500. It was a terrific deal. But Sam knew the board still needed some work.
I remade it from top to bottom, inside. It changed all of the electrolytic capacitors, cleaned all the rotary pots that controlled the gain. And tell you the truth, I had a great time doing that because I was so proud. I was familiar with this board.
Phillips's most innovative improvement to the board was the addition of reverberation.
Reverb is a little delay of sound. It gave us a little bit of a different sound, and boy, I thought that was very important to have a sound that was a little different.
For nearly a decade, Sun Studios and the soundboard would define rock and roll. Blue Suede Shoes by Carl Perkins, That's All Right Mama, Elvis Presley, I Walk the Line by Johnny Cash, Great Balls of Fire by Jerry Lee Lewis. In 1960, Sun Studios relocated to a more modern space in Memphis, and the soundboard was finally forced into retirement. By this time, it was nearly 30 years old, out of date, and Phillips needed to keep up with the current technology. He put the board in storage in his brother's warehouse. There it remained until 1976, when a friend of Sam's used it for an exhibit on rock and roll.
I kind of turned it over to good hands and threatened them with their life if they lost it.
In 1995, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame opened in Cleveland, Ohio. The RCA soundboard made the trip north to be on display for the opening.
Sam felt that this was the most important piece to be up there because it was the one that really started rock and roll music the way we know it today.
But the board was not destined to stay in Cleveland. After all, rock and roll was born in Memphis. In the year 2000, it was time for the board to come home again, this time for good, to Memphis's Rock and Soul Museum.
Because he felt that to have it here, less than really about a mile from where it originally was in use at Sun Studios, was more important than having it be at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And he also felt that this museum really did tell the true story of what happened in Memphis. This board was the artifact that spun off all of the other things that are in the museum.
I looked after it and I babied my baby, I really did, and it's still one of the most beautiful pieces of gear that I'll ever see. I mean, it is, because it delivered a lot to the people. It was faithful to me, it was faithful to everybody that got on it. It was just a good board. I bet you could hook the damn thing up right now and it'd work.
The Sun Studios RCA 76D soundboard is on permanent public display at the Rock and Soul Museum in Memphis, Tennessee. Next on History's Lost and Found, the death car of an American hero, General George S. Patton's